Hi friends, I'm excited to talk about literacy with you guys today and to share a little bit about how you can be able to raise readers in your home. So a lot of the information I'm going to be giving today is from the Read Aloud Handbook by Jim Trelease. And if you haven't heard of it or read it yet, I would really suggest reading it because it's an amazing book that gives so many tips and tools to parents to be able to encourage reading in your home. So I was reading recently, and I want to make sure I get the wording right, but I was reading recently a couple statistics that came from the National Literacy Trust on a study that they had been doing. And the first statistic was that kids who have 100 books in their home have higher test scores than kids who don't. And on top of that, in the Read Aloud Handbook, it also mentions that kids who have been read aloud to and have books in their home do better on test scores. So it's not just the socioeconomic status, it's not necessarily the education of parents or anything like that. It's actually just having been read to in your home, and that parents obviously took the time to advertise and model reading in their homes. So I thought that was something really interesting because as a teacher, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that would have been the case. So another part of that National Literacy Trust statistic I wanted to share is, I want to make sure I get this one right too, it says kids who have 500 books in their home will have an average of 3.9 more years of education, resulting in nearly $1 million more in lifetime earnings. So that's huge. If you want your kids to be successful, obviously buying books and things like that, it costs money, but it's a good investment for your children and grandchildren and the other children in your life. So we know that kids are being advertised to all the time, and we can and should be advertising reading to our children. So we can do this in a few ways in our homes. First of all, every time you read aloud to a child, you're advertising to that child about the positives of reading. Secondly, I read this in the Read Aloud Handbook, and it has worked for our family. Putting baskets around your house and in the car, even in the bathroom, because kids are captive. They don't have much to do while they're sitting on the toilet. Having books around all over the place can make a huge difference. I read this months ago and I started to do this in our family, and it has made a huge difference for my son in reading. Somebody who already loved reading is now reading a ton, even more than I thought because of that. Another thing is having, I don't know if you guys have heard of rain gutter bookshelves, so you can even do rain gutter bookshelves, but having the titles facing out so that kids can be able to see the titles, that's even more engaging to them, is another way to advertise reading. And so another thing that's talked about in the Read Aloud Handbook is that the best U.S. Olympic skiers come from the states with abundance of snow. So just the same thing, the same point applies to reading. The homes with an abundance of reading materials will produce the best readers. So like I said, it's an investment that's worth it. You can't underestimate the power of building up your own home library and the impact that will have on your kids or your grandkids or the kids that come to your house. So you're empowering kids with books by engaging them at their interest level and at their reading level. So you need to take the time to find the books that engage them, that are interesting to them. So just like when kids grow out of clothes, they grow out of books, and their reading interests and reading levels change. So you have to really be mindful of that. So for those in school, you can also advertise reading and engage with reading by turning it into a positive incentive to stay up a little bit later, because oftentimes in school it becomes a forced thing that they have to read a certain amount of minutes. So we use it as something positive. Okay, you can stay up 20 more minutes or 15 more minutes or 30 more minutes to be able to read. So you can start out that incentive at a young age, but also continue that through school as well. So the last thing I want to talk about is modeling reading. So modeling reading is so important. We are constantly modeling things that we do and say in our homes. But one thing that's so important is modeling reading. I'm sure you guys would agree that most people wouldn't think that kids or adults are reading enough. And I think that is true even in my life, even though we read a ton in our house, that we're probably not even reading enough. So modeling reading is so important, making sure that they know what you're doing and that you are doing it. So the question in the Read Along Handbook book that came up is, when should I stop reading to my child? So I'll read you the direct quote just so I make sure I get it right. He said, "The single most important activity for building the knowledge required for eventual success is reading aloud to children. It is a practice that should continue throughout the grades." So up until when they go to college is the suggestion. And that actually comes from the United States Commission on Reading. Just like you may know a child's reading level, but you may not know his listening level. So the book talked about how the Crosby Show was written at a 4th grade reading level, yet first graders who couldn't read the script could clearly be able to listen and understand the show. So children can hear and understand stories that are more complicated and interesting than anything that they could be able to read on their own. So I hope you found some of these tips useful and important for your life, and thank you. I'm excited to have a Facebook party with you. Bye.